The Ocean of Theosophy by William Q. Judge. Chapter 13, Devachan. Having shown that just beyond the threshold of human life there is a place of separation, wherein the better part of man is divided from his lower and brute elements, we come to consider what is the state after death of the real being, the immortal who travels from life to life. Struggling out of the body, the entire man goes into Kamaloka, or into purgatory, where he again struggles and loosens himself from the lower skandhas. This period of birth over, the higher principles, Atma-Buddhi-Manas, begin to think in a manner different from that which the body and brain permitted in life. This is the state of Devachan, a Sanskrit word meaning literally, quote, the place of the gods, end quote, where the soul enjoys felicity. But as the gods have no such bodies as ours, the self in Devachan is devoid of a mortal body. In the ancient books it is said that this state lasts, quote, for years of infinite number, end quote, or for, quote, a period proportionate to the merit of the being, end quote. And when the mental forces peculiar to this state are exhausted, quote, the being is drawn down again to be reborn in the world of mortals, end quote. Devachan is therefore an interlude between births in the world. The law of karma, which forces us all to enter the world, being ceaseless in its operation, and also universal in scope, acts also on the being in Devachan, for only by force or operation of karma are we taken out of Devachan. It is something like the pressure of the atmosphere which, being continuous and uniform, will push out or crush that which is subjected to it unless there is a compensating quantity of atmosphere to counteract the pressure. In the present case of the karma of the being, is the atmosphere always pressing the being on or out from the state to state. The counteracting quantity of atmosphere is the force of the being's own life thoughts and aspirations, which prevent his coming out of Devachan until that force is exhausted, but which, being spent, has no more power to hold back the decree of our self-made mortal destiny. The necessity for this state after death is one of the necessities of evolution, growing out of the nature of mind and soul. The very nature of manas, or mind, requires a devachanic state as soon as the body is lost, and it is simply the effect of loosening the bonds placed upon the mind by its physical and astral encasement. In life we can but to a fractional extent act out our thoughts we have each moment, and still less we can exhaust the psychic energies engendered by each day's aspirations and dreams. The energy thus engendered is not lost or annihilated, but it is stored in the mind or the manas. But the body, brain, and astral body permit no full development of the force. Hence, held latent until death, it bursts then from the weakened bonds and plunges manas, the thinker, into the expansion, use, and development of the thought force set up in life. The impossibility of escaping this necessary state lies in man's ignorance of his own powers and faculties. From this ignorance, delusion arises, and the mind, or manas, not being wholly free, is carried by its own force into thinking of Devachan. But while ignorance is the cause for going into this state, the whole process is remedial, restful, and beneficial. For if the average man returned at once to another body in the same civilization that he had just quitted, his soul would be completely tired out and deprived of the needed opportunity for the development of the higher part of its nature. Now the ego, or the soul, being minus mortal body and kama, or desire, clothes itself in Devachan with a vesture which cannot be called body, but may be styled means or vehicle, and in that it functions in the devachanic state entirely on the plane of mind and soul. Everything is as real then to the being as this world seems to be to us. It simply now has gotten the opportunity to make its own world for itself, unhampered by the clogs of physical life. Its state may be compared to that of the poet or an artist who, wrapped in the ecstasy of composition or arrangement of color, cares not for or knows not of either time or objects of the world around him. We are making causes every moment, and but two fields exist for the manifestation and effect of those causes. These are the objective, as this world is called, and the subjective, which is both here and after we have left earth life. The objective field relates to earth life and the grosser part of man, to his bodily acts and his brain thoughts, as also sometimes to his astral body. The subjective has to do with his higher and spiritual parts. In the objective field, the psychic impulses cannot work out, nor can the high learnings and aspirations of his soul. Hence, these must be the basis, the cause, the substratum, and support for the state of Devachan. What then is the time, measured by mortal years? Then that one will stay in Devachan. This question, while dealing with what earthmen call time, does not, of course, touch the real meaning of time itself, that is, of what may be in fact for the solar system the ultimate order, precedence, succession, and length of moment. It is a question which may be answered in respect to our time, but not certainly in respect to the time on the planet Mercury, for instance, where time is not the same as ours, nor indeed in respect to the time as conceived by the soul. As to the latter, any man can see that after many years have slipped away, he has no direct perception of the time just past, but he is able only to pick out some of the incidents which marked its passage, and as to some poignant or happy instance or hours, he seems to feel them but as yesterday. And thus it is for the being in Devachan. No time is there. The soul has all the benefit of what goes on within itself in that state, but it indulges in no speculations as to the lapses of moments. All is made up of events, while all the time the solar orb is marking off the years for us on the earth plane. This cannot be regarded as an impossibility if we will remember how, as is well known in life, events, pictures, thoughts, arguments, introspective feeling will all sweep over us in perfect detail in an instant. Or, as is known of those who have been drowning, the events of a whole lifetime pass in a flash before the eye of the mind. But the ego remains, as said in Devachan, for a time exactly proportioned to the psychic impulses generated during life. Now, this being a matter which deals with the mathematics of the soul, no one but a master can tell what time would be the average man of the century in every land. Hence, we will have to depend on the masters of wisdom for that average, as it must be based upon calculation. They have said, as is well put by Mr. A.P. Sinnett in his Esoteric Buddhism, that the period is 1,500 years in general. From a reading of his book, which was made up from the letters of the masters, it is to be inferred he desires it to be understood that the Devachanic period is in each and every case 15 centuries. But to do away with that misapprehension from his informants, wrote a latter date that is the average period and not a fixed one. Such must be the truth, for as we see that men differ in respect to the periods of time they remain in any state of mind in life due to the varying intensities of their thought, so it must be in Devachan, where the thought has a greater force, though always due to the being who had the thought. So this is basically saying that when we reincarnate, we do not reincarnate until approximately 1,000 to 1,500 years, and maybe a little bit past that, has expired. What the Master did say on this is as follows. The quote, dream of Devachan, end quote, lasts until karma is satisfied in that direction. In Devachan, there is a, quote, gradual exhaustion of force, end quote. Quote, the stay in Devachan is proportioned to the unfinished psychic impulses originating in earth life. Those whose attractions were preponderantly material will sooner drawn back into rebirth by the force of tanha, end quote. Tanha is the thirst for life. He therefore, who has not in life originated many psychic impulses, will have built little basis or force in his essential nature to keep his higher principles in Devachan. About all he will have are those originated in childhood, before he began to fix his thoughts on materialistic thinking. The thirst for life expressed by the word tanha is the pulling or the magnetic force lodged in the skandhas or planes, inherent in all beings. In such a case as this, the average rule does not apply, since the whole effect either way is due to a balancing of forces and is the outcome of action and then reaction. And this sort of materialistic thinker may emerge out of Devachan into another body here in a month, allowing for the unexpended psychic forces originated in early life. But as every one of such person varies as to class, intensity, and quantity of thought and psychic impulse, each may vary in respect to the time that they stay in Devachan. Desperately materialistic thinkers will remain in Devachanic condition, stupefied or asleep, as it were, as they have no forces in them appropriate to that state except in a very vague fashion, and for them it can be very truly said that there is no state after death, so far as mine is concerned. They are torpid for a while, and then they live again on earth. This general average of the stay in Devachan gives us the length of a very important human cycle, the cycle of reincarnation. For under that law, national development will be found to repeat itself, and the times that are past will be found to come yet once again. The last series of powerful and deeply imprinted thoughts are those which give color and trend to the whole life in Devachan. The last moment will color each subsequent moment. On those the soul and the mind fix themselves and weave of them a whole set of events and experiences, expanding them to their highest limit, carrying out all that was not possible in life. Thus expanding and weaving these thoughts, the entity has its youth and growth and growing old. That is the uprush of the force, its expansion, and its dying down to final exhaustion. If the person has led a colorless life, the Devachan will be colorless. If a rich life, then it will be a very rich variety and effect. Rich meaning full, a lot of whatever it is, not necessarily money. Well, definitely not money. Existence there in Devachan is not a dream except in a conventional sense, for it is a stage of the life of man, and when we are there, this present life is a dream. It is not in any sense monotonous. We are too prone to measure all possible states of life and places for experience by our present earthly one, and to imagine it to be reality. But the life of the soul is endless, and not to be stopped for one instant. Leaving our physical body is but a transition to another place or another plane for living in. But as the ethereal garments of Devachan are more lasting than those that we wear here, the spiritual, moral, and psychic causes us more time in expanding and exhausting in that state than they do on Earth. If the molecules that form the physical body were not subject to general chemical laws that govern physical Earth, then we should live as long as these bodies as we do in the Devachanic state. But such a life of endless strain and suffering would be enough to blast the soul compelled to undergo it. Pleasure would then be turned into pain, and sure fiat would end but in an immortal insanity. Nature always is kind and leads us soon again into heaven for a well-needed rest, for the flowering of the best and the highest in our natures or essence. Thus, Devachan is neither meaningless nor useless. Quote, "In it we are rested. That part of us which could not bloom under the chilling skies of earth life burst forth into flower and goes back with us to another life stronger and more a part of our nature than ever before. Why shall we repine that nature kindly aids us in the interminable struggle? Why thus keep the mind revolving about this petty personality and its good and evil fortune?" End quote. Quoted from the letter of the Mahatma or the Mahatma letters. You should probably, side note, look into those. A lot of information to be found in the Mahatma letters. But it is sometimes asked, what of those we have left behind? Do we see them there in Devachan? We do not see them there in fact, but we make to ourselves their images as full, complete, and objective as in life, and devoid of all that we then thought was a blemish. We live with them, and we see them grow great and good, instead of being mean, or bad, or defective. The mother who has left a drunken son behind finds him before her in Devachan as a good man, a sober man, and likewise through all possible cases, parent, child, husband, and wife have their loved ones there perfect and full of knowledge. This is purely for the benefit of the soul. You may call it a delusion, if you will, but the illusion is necessary to happiness, just as it as often is in life, and as it is in the mind that makes the illusion. It is no cheat or fraud. Certainly the idea of a heaven built over the verge of hell, where you must know if any brains or memory are left to you under the modern Orthodox scheme, that your erring friends and relatives are suffering eternal torture, will bear no comparison with the doctrine of Devachan. But entities in Devachan are not wholly devoid of power to help those that are still left on earth. Love, Love, the master of life, if real, if pure, and if deep, will sometimes cause the happy ego, happy soul into Devachan to affect those on earth for their good, not only in the moral field, but also in that of the material circumstance. This is possible under a law of occult universe, which cannot be explained now with profit. But the fact may be stated. It has been given out before by H.P. Blavatsky, without, however, much attention being drawn to it. The last question to consider is whether we here can reach those in Devachan, or do they come here? We cannot reach them, nor affect them, unless we are adepts, or, quote, a part of the elect. The claim of mediums to hold communion with these spirits of the dead is baseless, and still less valid is the claim of the ability to help those who have gone into Devachan. The Mahatma, a being who has developed all his powers and is free from illusion, can go into the Devachanic state and then communicate with the egos or the souls there. Such is one of their functions, and that is the only school of the apostles after death. They deal with certain entities in Devachan for the purpose of getting them out of the state so as to return to earth for the benefit of mankind or the race at that time. The egos they thus deal with are those whose nature is great and deep, but who are not wise enough to be able to overcome the natural illusions of Devachan. Sometimes also the hypersensitive and the pure medium goes into the state and then holds communication with the egos or the souls there. But this is very rare, and certainly will not take place with the general run of mediums who trade for money or earthly gain. But the soul or the ego never descends here to the medium, and the gulf between the consciousness of Devachan and that of earth is so vast and deep and wide that it is but seldom the medium can remember upon returning recollection here what or whom it met or saw or even heard while in the Devachan state. This gulf is similar to that which separates Devachan from rebirth or reincarnation. It is one in which all memory of what preceded is blotted out, like a cup of forgetfulness, so no one can cheat. The whole period allotted by the soul's forces being ended in Devachan, the magnetic threads which bind it to earth begin to assert their power. The self wakes from the dreamlike state. It is borne swiftly off into a new body, and then, just before birth, it sees for a split moment all the causes that led it into Devachan, and then back to the life that it's about to begin. And knowing full truth, and knowing it to be all just, to be the result of his own past life, it repines not, but takes up the cross once again, and another soul has come back to earth. End of Chapter 13, The Ocean of Theosophy, by William Q. Judge. Love yourselves and love each other unconditionally, and fear not. There is nothing to fear. No fear. There's no perpetual burning and torture, hellfire, that you're going to be dropped into because you made a mistake. Fear not, my friends. Peace.